Hello, everybody, and welcome into the USL show. Small panel tonight, but we are happy to talk about what was a really exciting week of action in League One and the Championship. Plenty of news, so we'll start off with some intros. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. I was off last week, apartment hunting in Charlotte. The move is official this Friday, so I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun to be in the big city, and it's been hectic trying to get everything shut down. And I've noticed my cat is going to really miss me. She's been following me around the house the past few days, so I think I'll miss her too.
Pets really have like that sixth sense for when something is changing or like change is afoot. I've never had that experience, but I've noticed it with other people. Kind of bittersweet, honestly.
Yeah, she's been a very sweet cat, about a 10-year-old kitty, so I'll miss her.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in terms of just getting right down to business with USL and new starts, much like yourself, I thought Hartford made a really interesting move this week. They brought in Nick Sankovic, I think is the pronunciation. You pronounce that "k" in the middle more strongly, but he's somebody who was pretty much in there in MLS in the front office of the league from day one. Played a big role with the Metro Stars before the sale to the Red Bull system. Was there with the foundation of Philadelphia Union, commissioner of the National Lacrosse League for a little bit, but now he's coming in to be the CEO of Hartford. I wonder if you had any thoughts about that.
And it's someone who has familiarity with your favorite NHL, Arizona
That's
Coyotes,
right.
as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's a longtime sports executive. You have someone who came in from the University of New Haven, so as a
Yeah.
goalkeeper, he was there, and it's someone who's very familiar with the landscape of soccer across this league. And by all accounts, it seems like something that should definitely help out with Hartford. I know there's been a lot of, I guess you could say, back and forth opinions on his time with the Metro Stars, and especially with the Union, as the Union really started
Yeah.
their ascension after his departure from the franchise or the club at this instance. And it's really tough. I feel like with Hartford Athletic, that's the most difficult job in the Eastern Conference right now. You look at a team whose only playoff appearance came in the COVID shortened season of 2020. Outside of that, it's just been an incredibly challenging place to go and win. And we've seen it this year that even now, assistant coach of the New England Revolution, Tab Ramos, wasn't able to be successful at the club. That it's going to be interesting how they try and position themselves to move forward, because by all accounts they have the support off the field. They have all of that fan base that is there. It's just they've never been able to generate that on field performance.
Yeah, I mean, to the fan support point, they're drawing almost 5,000 people out to every game, and they're one of the worst teams in the league by record. I do think with Sankovic there, say what you will about the success on the field, and obviously his stint in Philadelphia ended with fan protests against the regime. That's a terrible look, no matter how you slice it. But he's somebody who was the shepherd of what became Red Bull Arena. He was instrumental in getting PPL Park built there in the suburbs. He's somebody who can get a team on solid grounding in all of those infrastructure sorts of ways. So if he takes more of the business side of things, really is his main charge there, I think he's going to be a good addition to what Hartford's cooking up. There are things that they need to solve on the pitch. I mean, the Ramos era was not good. The follow up now, despite the fact that they've got a roster with a lot of fairly big names in the USL, just hasn't melded in a way that's ever led to effective soccer. But Hartford deserves credit for always putting the best foot forward in terms of what they're trying to do, at least for the fans. And I'm looking forward to the dynamic they get next year with Rhode Island coming into the league as well.
And I do think having that rival to kind of push you
Yeah.
off the field and even on the field is going to be incredibly crucial. Well, I mean, we've seen it within Premier League teams having that rival of having someone else to push you to go forward. I mean, in Southampton and Brighton was a very good comparison. Both South Coast teams that one fell by the wayside as the other one moved into its ascension into Europe. And I mean, and let's be honest, Hartford can't get much worse than they are right
Right.
now. That uh, it's almost worth taking a chance on a hire like this if it could just drive you just a little bit closer to just qualifying for the playoffs rather than being eliminated with 5 odd games left to go.
Yeah, and I put out the like half conspiracy theory on Twitter that given what he has done with stadiums, given that they play in a venue owned by the city, maybe that's something in the offing in the future. But only good vibes there, honestly, in terms of the ambition. And I think another club in the USL that's sort of showing off that same level of spark is the Oakland Roots. They're in a bit of a funk on the pitch, honestly, but off the field, they're nothing but winning right now. Their fundraiser, fan ownership, the ability to buy into that team has garnered over $2 million in about a week and a half at this point. I mean, incredibly impressive. Some of the names involved are fun. I know Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day joined up this week. So love to get some thoughts on the good stuff happening in the East Bay right now.
I mean, and if we're seeing San Diego exit the league, which is incredibly unfortunate, you're looking at an Oakland team who's almost like carrying the torch past what San Diego did as that other club who's being representative of its community, who's doing all of these efforts off the pitch to be a sustainable club and community run organization. And to have this kind of crowdfunding efforts, I mean, everything kind of reference what like Europe has done, especially within the Bundesliga's 50+1 rule, or what the Green Bay Packers do in the NFL. But to have this kind of buy-in ownership, and we've seen your league in the past, and it's always just been, oh, it's just a donation to help us keep the lights on. This is something more than that, that you're actually getting a tangible item of ownership within this club. And it's something I think a lot of USL teams should take a page out of, that they're doing everything right off the field, and it's a playbook they should be running by.
Yeah, and I mean, just comparing and contrasting with who we just talked about in Hartford, Oakland's been a team that was really successful with their season in NISA when they wanted to kind of have the proving ground of let's see what we can do in this first year of professional soccer. They move up to the USL from there. They're always eking into the playoffs. They've seen a successful transition from a couple of managers. They just understand the assignment that they're tasked with of this slower growth, this real focus on building up the academy, that Project 510 that they've got going on. At every level, it's been really thoughtful with the way that they've tried to stay local, especially given the fact that Oakland is losing teams left and right. It's an area that hasn't seen the level of investment that you would hope for, and it's hurt the community in a lot of ways. So to have the bastion that is Oakland right now, or the Oakland Roots rather, is really fantastic. The buy-in is awesome. I love the comparisons you're making with the Bundesliga there. I know Detroit City obviously has that same aspect with fan ownership.
Chattanooga FC is the only other one in
Yeah.
lower league soccer for the United States that I can think of. But obviously, there's everything in the Bundesliga. That's what the entire model of their soccer system built off of. But to have that in USL, I think, is a really great proof of concept, because as the league continues to grow and get more teams into it, maybe some more teams kind of look towards this model moving forward.
I mean, imagine if you can just pull. I mean, not every team is going to be as supported to get $2 million in a week and a half, but that sort of money really matters for a club that could be on the brink. Something that everybody should be looking into, something that I hope we see progress from when we get to like the Board of Governors meeting this winter. Any other points for you off the pitch before we get into some of the recaps? All right, then let us move over and start with the Louisville-San Diego game first and foremost. That was a game where Lou City got a 1-0 win over the visiting Loyal. Pretty interesting interconference matchup. Leaves Louisville in a really solid place in terms of that home field advantage race. How are you feeling about that one at Lynn Family Stadium?
I definitely think both of these teams are kind of in almost a weird spot, that they're really on somewhat of an island, that I don't think either one is going to get in any trouble of dropping out of the playoff picture. But then you see them, the teams in front of them, that they've already built up a very sizable gap to it. But like you had mentioned, Louisville definitely seems to be in the driver's seat right now. If you compare their form to the likes of Memphis and a bit more distantly behind them, Indy 11, they definitely seem to have that kind of hold on on that fourth place spot and have won 3 of their last 4. They may not catch up to the already clinched Charleston Battery and probably not Tampa Bay and our current Shield favorites, Pittsburgh Riverhounds, but it's a team that we were very concerned about for the entire, like, just first half of the season, that this isn't the Louisville side we're all used to. And by now, they just, as they do every year, they just find a way to get results and build it towards the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, specifically within this game, wish we had Alan here to break some of this down, but San Diego was very aggressive with the way that they were trying to man mark in the midfield. But whenever they won the ball back, they never seemed to want to go forward with any sense of tempo and incision. It left them pretty impotent in the way they were building. Whereas Louisville, who historically has been a team that's really put a high value on possession, went so direct in this one. And it's been a theme of the latter part of this season that they've kind of changed up the tenets and become much more of a counterattacking long ball sort of team. And with some of the personnel they've got, with some of the injuries they've got, it's made them more effective. It's fitting the system that they have. This game was really the showcase of it, where they barely had 30% of the ball and they ended up dominating on the stat sheet. I think the standout performance for me over the weekend in the midfield was Carlos Mogel, who, I mean, he's 19, 20 years old, showing so much poise in the midfield, really being able to control the game when San Diego obviously was trying to push through that center part of the pitch. I thought Indy had a good chance of coming to nab that spot that Louisville's holding right now, given what happened to the 11. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Or no, we won't. But Indy lost at New Mexico. And I mean, man, Louisville just feels like they're getting back on track. And that's me having that implicit trust for the fact that they're a little bit of a dynasty. But I just like the way that they've pivoted probably since the Adams trade a couple weeks ago.
One thing I will want to bring up with Louisville City here is look at their remaining schedule. They have a 3-game road swing right now, but that's Miami, Loudoun, and New Mexico, 3 teams that are either firmly outside of the playoff picture and then or they're like just on the cusp of it. And then you have Hartford at home and then Tampa Bay to close out the season. This could be a team that like really has a lot of momentum carrying themselves into the postseason. And honestly, if they can lock in as the 4th seed, I would be pretty nervous seeing them outside of in the second round if I was Pittsburgh or Tampa Bay winning the number 1 seed.
For sure. Just on that schedule note, like Miami's in the thick of it in the playoff race. Loudoun got a draw with the Battery last weekend, and they've added a couple players on loan that are making them look dangerous at this point. I had noticed a couple weeks ago that the league had scheduled that Louisville-Tampa Bay game for the final week. You know that they thought that was going to be a matchup for the number 1 seed, which I find a little bit funny.
Oh, it always comes back to bite the head sometimes with some of those schedules. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Loudoun. I think it's a little late for their push, but it's one player from Charlotte FC. I think Chris Heggert. He had a really fantastic debut. He was someone who was pretty involved in their first team, at least practices, and within Crown Legacy, their MLS Next Pro team. And to at least have this experience, I know it's maybe in vain given where Loudoun is currently, but it's invaluable to have this playing time right now, especially for a player who could very much suit a purpose for Charlotte FC, whether that's selling the player on to a USL club next offseason or having them involved next year.
Yeah, Heggert was in the team of the week, and he's somebody who, when I've done my little recap threads, I mean, he's been a standout. He looks so technical in the midfield, and it shows the effect of what you can get from somebody who's on loan from MLS at this point of the season, and another club that's feeling the effects of that in an interesting way is San Antonio FC, who, I mean, they had Nick Marsman in goal. He's on loan from just MLS as a general entity because the single franchise model that they've got going on is crazy. But I mean, really interesting draw with Tampa Bay over the weekend, a 3-3 result there at Toyota Park. The storylines are endless. We're going to hit on a couple of points in this one for sure. But first thoughts on that game.
San Antonio is still unbeaten in their last 10 matches, but they're winless in their last 5. It's it's a run that I think we're not used to seeing because everything last year, San Antonio was the team that if we penciled them in as winning every time we picked them in our weapons. But this year, it seems like they're getting the job done. And we've always talked about them being that mentality monsters every season. But they have just nearly as many draws as they do wins this year, 13-12 in favor of wins. It's a very interesting San Antonio team that we have right now, and having to basically get a last minute equalizer to rescue a point here against a good Tampa Bay team. I don't know if it bodes well for San Antonio repeating as league champions, much less repeating as Western Conference champions.
Yeah, we pushed out the tactics show this week on the USL show Twitter. Basically, the focus that I took was on San Antonio and some of the things that they were having in terms of the formation and the shape that Alan Marcina was going with. They started this game in a 4-3-3. The balance that they had in the midfield, just with that extra player in the middle, completely changed the game. It made them a bit more flexible. It let them defend sideline to sideline with a better sense of rotation, a lot more responsibility as a holistic unit. And for whatever reason, I can't really explain it. Marcina just reverted back to the kind of 5-3-2 shape that they often prefer. Suddenly, the balance was gone. They were less able to deny the middle of the pitch. And that's how Tampa Bay got back into this game. So I'm questioning that. And then the big thing, obviously, I mentioned Marsman coming in goal. Jordan Farr going to the bench is something that is kind of a big deal at this point. Farr obviously was, for my taste, the best goalie in the USL last season. He's down by the numbers in 2023. But to take somebody who is very popular with the fan base, who's really kind of the talisman of what this team was doing with that mentality monsters defense first unit, and to send him to the bench because you need this lone goalie to get 5 appearances to be eligible for the playoffs, it's a really bold decision. And I'm just curious how that plays in the locker room, how that'll affect that team down the stretch as they are in competition for the 1 seed.
And John Fuller in chat was correct. They're not San Antonio is not unbeaten in their last 10. They had that defeat against FC Tulsa that I had overlooked a few weeks ago. So that's an incredibly bold call that you're making on San Antonio's part to move forward. And you look at the upcoming schedule of having to play Orange County twice. You have Oakland and Indy 11 there, and it's a very much in-form Orange County team at the moment, as just someone that I wouldn't want to go into playing right now.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to give a moment of shine to the Rowdy side of things here, where last weekend they see the injuries to Antley and Guillen. This weekend, they have Forrest Lasso go down after about 25 minutes. Nicky Law is still just over in the UK sorting out his visa thing. So this was, I want to say, the 3rd match in a row where they had just somebody else coaching the team. Granted, Stuart Dobson, who's been there forever and a day, but Dobson was really right about making changes in the second half. They brought in Josh Perez into this front 3 shape that really effectively changed the game and took advantage of San Antonio kind of turning weak. So credit to the Rowdies, who, if I was a betting man, I would have them grabbing that 1 seed in the East come season's end.
Although we talk about the league making really fun schedules, the real match that could be the battle for the number 1 seed is the penultimate weekend, as we have Tampa Bay hosting the Pittsburgh Riverhounds on October 7th.
Ooh, yeah, that will absolutely be a juicy one. And real quick in the chat, I did want to address Andy questioning the thing about the 5-game rule for players to be eligible for the playoffs. I have no idea personally. I can't find anything in the rule book. But what I do know is that Nicholas Murray in the Rondo newsletter from the league cited the 5-game thing. So I trust him on any USL fact ever. And he says that even if you're a loanee, it applies. So trust Nicholas Murray, follow Nicholas Murray, read everything that man is putting out is my constant advice. But moving on from this one, I want to stay with a little bit more interconference action, where Phoenix Rising took it to Detroit City late on Saturday night. They got a 5-0 win. Phoenix on a bit of a roll. Detroit still kind of clinging into that bubble race. Love to get some thoughts from the Valley.
I mean, this was Detroit's worst ever defeat in their time in USL, with it just barely beat out their 5-1 defeat to Tampa Bay from earlier this season. I even looked back from all of last year in 2022. We had 6 instances of a team losing a match 5-0, and only one of them, San Diego, after they lost to Los Dos 5-0, were able to win the very next match that they played. I mean, luckily for Detroit, they have Hartford coming up, which should be a
That's a
victory for
gift.
them.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other story that you're looking at it as been on an absolute roll lately. I mean, unbeaten in the last 5, 3 consecutive shutouts in that time, and this is looking like the Phoenix Rising team we know of, the Solomon Asante era Phoenix Rising team that we're used to seeing, as they're really making a push up the Western Conference standings right now, and they're right neck and neck with Orange County for that number 3 spot.
Yeah, I mean, the way that they're attacking right now is the standout thing. It's a little bit give and take, ebb and flow with the offense, but when they're clicking, they're clicking. Danny Trejo and Manuel Arriaga really both have an argument that they're going to end up as the Golden Boot winner right now. I think Juan Guerra has the luxury of being able to mix it up with the third player in that attacking line. Pena Samanakas gives you a little bit more of the forward instinct. Federella is a little bit more of a classic number 10, a very incisive passer who will sit a little deeper. But the width that they've got, the way that they transition back into defense, they're playing pretty optimally from front to back right now. Rocco Rios Novo in goal is somebody who deserves a huge shout as well. He seems to come up with the big saves every single time he's called upon right now. From the Detroit side of things, I've got some questions on what's happening with the team choice. I wasn't a huge fan of a very defensive lineup against Rising. I understand that you're trying to quell what they do in attack, but sticking with the 4-4-2 wasn't the answer. And then putting in Lai Diop and Connor Rutz as a striker pretty much just hamstrung their offense while not addressing the systemic issues that were going to be a problem in this game. I still fancy Detroit to probably take or overtake Tulsa to get into the last spot, but they're not doing themselves any favors. And the fact that they've been missing Steinwasser in favor of Ryan Shello recently strikes me a bit odd as well. Trevor James is smart, but I'm not quite sure about LaRouge right now.
And you're looking at Detroit's remaining schedule right now. Hartford already mentioned, but you have Colorado Springs, Indy 11, Loudoun United, and Pittsburgh on the final day. That's not really a schedule. I don't want to be going into a match against Bob Lilly needing to win going into the playoffs, even if you're playing that game at Keyworth. It's something that they need results kind of in these next few games against Hartford and certainly against Loudoun as we move towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a playoff team, you need to take care of business, and that's going to be the test for Detroit City in the next couple of weeks for sure. One more thing on Phoenix just before we transition. They've got a midweek game against Indy 11. It'll be the first time Indy has ever played at Phoenix, but it's the homecoming of Solomon Asante and Aiden Quinn to Phoenix, which I think is just a neat little storyline for a game. So excited for that one.
A crucial double week for Phoenix. Really, their next 3 games are incredibly crucial. You have Indy 11, El Paso, and Orange County for these next 3 games. And that Orange County game that they have on September 30th could go a long way in determining who's 3 and who's 4th in the Western Conference.
We'll touch on Orange County a little bit, but boy, their schedule in these last couple of weeks is a murderer's row.
Yeah, I mean, San Antonio, Phoenix, Oakland, San Antonio, and Monterey Bay to close out the season. I mean, credit aside from, at least for Colorado Springs getting that 1-0 victory over Orange County. But, I mean, OC had been on a very nice run of form up to this point, and if they can bounce back against San Antonio, and I think that's one of the games we are predicting over this week, if they can at least bounce back and I would say get minimum 4 points out of those 2 games they have against San Antonio, I would carry them for momentum into the playoffs as a dark horse team.
No, I completely agree. I mean, keeping Oloski around and just the form that they've been in, you can't count them out for sure. Before we get down to League One and a little bit of news there, I do want to hit on one more championship game. This one was played on Sunday with a bit of a rain delay, but it saw Rio Grande Valley, who is not going away on the Western Bubble, get a pretty gritty 1-0 win over the Birmingham Legion. Let's, in lieu of Kaler just being a sad human being, I'd love to know what you think about this one.
RGV just doesn't go away, and they've become the league's, I guess, Burnley or Stoke City, for lack of a better terms. They're just that thorn in every side. And if you look at basically this match of getting the 1-0 victory at home, I think they're. I don't know if they're going to have enough to make the playoffs from this, but they're giving it a very good go towards the end of the year. But I mean, if you look at Birmingham, 3 losses in the last 4 is just not the form that you would expect of a team who should be going to the playoffs. And it's a team that's been slowly moving down towards that playoff line over the last few weeks.
Yeah, just to summarize some of the stuff that Kaler had put out on the web, just thoughts on the team. He was pointing out that the fact that they only have 2 proper center backs on the roster has really led to some issues. The use of Jake Roof, who isn't athletic enough to fill in what they need at right back, is a problem if they need to have anybody but Colin Smith there. Personally, watching the game, I thought Juan Agudelo looked somewhat disinterested. He's somebody who, for a lot of the year, has had his moments. He comes with that national team pedigree, but he only turns it on in these very selective moments. Whereas the Toros came out firing. I was super worried about them when Wilmer Cabrera Jr. got recalled from loan and then sold over to Europe. But they got a loan kid over from the Chicago Fire MLS Next Pro affiliate. They made some really proactive changes in reaction to injury to bring on Robert Coronado in the midfield. They were first to every loose ball. They showed a lot of fire. They played direct when they needed to. It was a big game in Edinburgh from them. And no, I don't think that Rio Grande Valley is going to end up in the postseason at the end of the day, but they're making every effort to get back in there. And hey, this is a team that's made these late season runs time and time again. Wilmer Cabrera is a serial 8 seed winner. Like, this is the guy who always slides in at the bottom of that playoff field. They're not a team to be counted out, but Birmingham sputtering at the same time.
I think watching the battle between Tulsa and Detroit City, those 3 teams for the final 2 spots in the Eastern Conference, is going to be incredibly fascinating for the remainder of the season. You have Birmingham, who have to play Memphis twice, a Monterey Bay team who's been on a pretty decent run of form of unbeaten in the last 5, and close out the season with Charleston. There's really no margin for error in that one, or they got to hope that Tulsa or Detroit just isn't up to form for themselves.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about that Charleston game, there's a real scenario where the Battery are competing for the 1 seed, and they're going to be coming full bore trying to get the win there. No easy matchups left. And frankly, I think that Birmingham is pretty much safe in that spot. I have a hard time seeing 2 teams overtake them. But the fact that they're having this discussion right now, with the talent on that roster, with the fact that they've been a team in contention for home field advantage for a couple years running, has to be a disappointing outcome for the way that the season has gone, the way it started with the Open Cup run and all of that.
And even with Tulsa being unbeaten in their last 3 games, I just think having to go on the road to play Charleston and Pittsburgh in back-to-back weeks is a very tall ask. And when you factor in that Detroit has that game in hand over Tulsa at the moment, I think it's just a very challenging kind of remaining games that you don't want to go into dropping points. They do play Hartford on the final day of the season, which could very well either be a layup to get their chances locked into the postseason, but it really depends on Detroit and what Birmingham can do for if Tulsa can qualify.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Birmingham was a team that I hoped would be in contention for home field advantage, and let's pivot down to a League One team that's sitting in a home field spot for that first opening round with the Charlotte Independents, who frankly got kind of smacked by Lexington in a 2-2 draw, and they were lucky to get that even result in the end. Obviously, big result for Lexington, who continued to put up a really respectable expansion campaign. but they also had the big news off the field. And that's the other component why I want to discuss this one, that Sam Stockley, who was the manager for the opening stretch of that team existing, is going to pivot to the front office role. And then Nacho Novo is taking over as the proper head coach on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, again, love to get some thoughts there.
Lexington, I feel like, has been a very respectable kind of start to their season. They're 10 points out of a playoff spot with just 4 games left. So it's a very tall ask, I think, to try and find their way into the postseason from here. But we talked about it at the start of the year, especially with Tyler, that these expansion teams, when you go into League One, is really about setting a foundation for the years to follow and just finding that good footing within the league and really make a push onwards. And I feel like making the change that they did at management and to kind of have that transition is you at least have these next 4 games to try and end the year on a high note. They're obviously not eliminated as of yet, but to kind of help the transition and kind of build towards the 2024 season. And to have a good performance like this against the Charlotte Independents with a 2-2 draw, I feel like has really, at least it has the potential to carry a lot of their momentum through towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, Nacho Novo is somebody who had a pretty good career in a lot of countries around the world. He's someone who sticks out to me. I know we did the Remember Some Guys episode, as he was hyped as this big acquisition for the Carolina Railhawks in their NASL days way back when. And he has kind of just been a lower league journeyman since then. But he comes with good experience. He's had a bit of youth coaching tenure in his time. I think he's going to be a good leader for the team. And keeping Stockley around is a smart decision as well, and very good for the club's continuity. We mentioned Oakland up top. That was sort of their thing first year, where Jordan Farrell came in, coached the team down the stretch, and then stepped back into more of that front office advisorial role. So good to have that depth of perspective and experience in Lexington. In this game, they almost tripled Charlotte in terms of expected goals. It took a really late kind of slip-up defensive error that you absolutely hate to see. Austin Pack was cooking for the Independents in this game. I mean, he's somebody who, I think I have a goalkeeper of the year vote in League One. Don't quote me on that. He's going to be in contention for the ballot there. But Lexington, the midfield, Pierre Mane was exceptional as a creator in a deeper spot. Ates Diouf continues to really shine as somebody who had the tenure with Austin Bold, was in San Antonio for a minute. Never quite impressed me in a kind of deeper number 8 spot, but he's playing as a striker, second striker in Lexington and doing well. So, I mean, you summed it up nicely when you said, talked about the respectability, talked the fact that they're only 10 points back of the playoffs, and it's not going to happen this year. But to be in that position down the stretch where you've been competitive for the bulk of the season is something to hang your hat on in year one.
And this is a Lexington team, and I feel like in League One, especially more so than the championship, winning at home is so important. We've said it before in our own group chat that when in doubt, pick the home team in our predictions for League One. And you're looking at a Lexington team who are unbeaten in their last 6 games at home and have only lost at home twice all year. That's a fantastic run of form to kind of carry themselves throughout the entire season, not just for on-field results, but to just attract fans, because fans are going to come in for a winning product. And if they can continue that momentum towards next season, I would tip Lexington to, at preseason, make the playoffs for next year if they can build upon this great foundation with some key acquisitions in the offseason and just continue this good form at home.
It's rare that you see a non-playoff team have that many so obviously talented creators in the side. You keep that core together and they've got something big.
I mean,
go ahead.
Like Northern Colorado has lost the same amount of games at home this year as Lexington.
Yeah, and that says a lot. And I mean, Northern Colorado is the mold you want to look towards if you're trying to think about a team that builds from a up and down year one with some potential and just keeps on that upward trajectory. Yeah, and then, I mean, speaking of teams on an upward trajectory, as we pivot down to the prediction portion of the show, Charleston Battery obviously have been one of the stories of the season with the way they've improved. They are hosting FC Tulsa coming up in the next couple of days. So let's get some thoughts on that matchup, and let's get a prediction for the winner.
I think Tulsa really has to get points out of this game if they want to, and basically kind of put themselves in a better spot for the playoffs. If Detroit is going up against Hartford for their next game and they have that match in hand, Tulsa cannot afford to drop points in this one. But if you look at it on the other side, you have a Charleston team who is chasing down those top seeds in the Eastern Conference. You have Tampa Bay in front of them who do have a game in hand and a point in front of them. I think Charleston is just really pushing to try and hunt down that number one seed. And considering they're unbeaten in their last 4 games, including 3 wins, I think they're going to come into this game with a just desire to win. And I'm backing them to get the result against FC Tulsa.
Yeah, Tulsa for me is always the team that I look at on paper and I think that they're going to do a little bit more than they are doing. This is an interesting matchup where so much of the Tulsa offense is driven through the gravity of Marcus Epps on that left wing. He's pretty much given the freedom to do what he wants, especially in tandem with Patrick Segrist on the overlap from that wingback spot. And I mean, that got them a goal early on in Oakland and saw them out to the win in the end. But Charleston, with the depth that they use their fullbacks at, the way that they have this variety of options at the winger spots, and they can go defensive if they want to address that threat. I think that plays a big part in this match. I think Charleston just has a little bit more of a settled identity at this point in the season. It feels to me like the Battery are going to win this game, and boy, does that put Tulsa in a tough spot going forward in the playoff race if they do lose it. Yeah, and then pivoting from there, let's head over to a West on West matchup where Colorado Springs is hosting the Sacramento Republic.
I'm really interested in what Colorado Springs does to kind of approach this game. You're looking at their last result was against Sacramento was a 4-0 defeat all the way back in April. But Colorado Springs, I feel like, is a team who, once you get past this game against Sacramento, you have Detroit, RGV, Las Vegas, and then a resurgent Phoenix team to end out the year. They could carry themselves on some really good momentum kind of going in towards the postseason. And as a 6th seed, at the moment, they could be a very much upset alert team that you would play. And I think with Sacramento coming off a midweek game against New Mexico to then have to go into Colorado Springs and play this one, there's going to be some tired legs that I feel like Sacramento in the week on 4 points, and they'll get a draw with this match.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a draw here as well. I think Sacramento is the better side, and if they didn't have that match at the weekend, they'd go full bore and get the win here. But they're a team that has struggled a lot with injuries this season. I mean, Rodrigo Lopez got his first start in months in the last game, but he came off pretty early. They're still integrating Christian Pirano. I think Matt LaGrossa went off injured against El Paso, I want to say. So they've got some of the balance things that they just need to make sure they're keeping check of, because if you're the Republic, you've got full-blown title aspirations and you don't want to blow it pursuing a midweek game against New Mexico or blow it in a regular season matchup that ultimately doesn't matter a ton against the Switchbacks. Whereas Colorado Springs, as decent as they've looked in a lot of their games, they still are in the thick of the bubble right now. And yes, they were good last time out, but they've been a bit inconsistent as well. So I think things balance. I think Colorado Springs really needs this one. Sacramento plays it a little cautious, and we end up with a draw. A big matchup of the match week for sure has to be the San Antonio-Orange County game. I know we talked a little bit about San Antonio before, but yeah, like I said, it's a preview of one that we're going to get in a couple of weeks again as well. So the first of 2 in a short order here. What are you thinking?
Orange County have been very impressive away from home this year. You have to go all the way back to July 9th when they lost 2-0 to RGV to find their last defeat away from home. And in that run of form since July 9th, they've picked up some really good results. I mean, you're looking at wins over Pittsburgh, Charleston, Sacramento. Oh, and I know that form had ended with the defeat to Colorado Springs, but I feel like Orange County is just really finding their form that they're seeing this year. And San Antonio, just in their recent games, they've looked competitive, but it's just not the same San Antonio team that we've been used to seeing from last year. I think both teams are going to be very good for this match, but I just have to take another draw.
Yeah, I thought about this one, I think it's somewhat unsustainable for San Antonio to keep not winning matches. I think that Alan Marcina has a good sense of the changes that he has to institute and the changes he has to stick with. They've got players like Nathan coming back from that loan from Portland Timbers. They've got Santiago Patino really clicking as a goal scorer at this point. Every sign mentally was pointing towards San Antonio getting the result. And then for whatever reason, I just went for Orange County. I think that Olaski is going to come up big given some of the defensive spacing issues they have. I really prefer what Orange County has in the midfield right now. I think when you look at guys like Scott Kasipli, Partita, they have such a sense of chemistry, such a sense of interchange and rotation. It feels like they're going to dictate this game on tempo grounds, and that's going to play into their hands, and that's ultimately going to get them a really big 3 points in this matchup. Let's pivot down to League One, where we don't talk enough about the fact that the Richmond Kickers are kind of in a free fall, but they're going to have the chance to change that with a home game against the Greenville Triumph. So pick on that.
This Richmond Kickers team kind of reminds me of their final days in USL Championship and their first season or two within USL 1. I feel like this just isn't the same Richmond Kickers team that we're really used to seeing, especially the team that we saw last year that was relatively decent. I mean, you're looking at a Kickers team right now who haven't won a game at home since July 1st, and they're already eliminated with just kind of their remaining games from the season. I think Greenville is going to win this game. They're really, with this victory, going to create enough of a gap that I think the current top 6 of the USL 1 is pretty much set except for the order. But yeah, Richmond has to be one of the disappointments of the year.
You mentioned not only have they not won at home since July 1st, they haven't won at all since July 1st. Like, that's got to be the most dispiriting stretch of form that you can imagine if you're a fan of this club. And I know in a couple of the recent shows, we've just talked about Terzaghi being missing, things like that. They've had inconsistencies with injuries and those sorts of problems. I've liked the fact that they've brought up a couple of kids from the youth system there. It doesn't make up for the fact that this season is a pretty colossal disappointment. The defense is a constant issue besides that goal scoring. Just a lot not to like there. The triumph for a team that has also been disappointing, frankly, but I think that I fancy them to get the full 3 points just because Richmond is in such a tailspin at the moment.
I mean, I was looking at their previous results. They need to pick up at least 3 wins in their next 4 games, or else it'll match that 2019 season that I had mentioned where they finished 9th. And just it's not the same Richmond team that we're used to, especially after their number 1 seed from last season. I know they exited the playoffs and finals, but yeah, it's just something you have to kind of wonder what the plan is moving forward for the Kickers.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to see. That's a club that is such a classic USL organization. And for them to drop down, for them to get where they're at this year, really dispiriting, honestly. Well, pivoting to one more prediction here from a team in Richmond that moved down to a North Carolina side that's popping right back up to the championship next season. They're going to visit Northern Colorado and Eamon Zayed in a matchup that was really hyped up a couple weeks ago and continues to be pretty big for playoff positioning. So let's get some thoughts on that one.
I really just have to back Northern Colorado with this one. They are in an absolutely fun matchup battle with Union Omaha for that number 1 seed. Both teams have won their last 5 games. You have both teams on 52 points. It's very much a 2021 Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton type championship battle at the moment. And then you have North Carolina here, who's on the outside. They have 3 losses in their last 5. And I think the midweek game against Central Valley Fuego would do a lot to kind of move them back into the picture for that top spot in the league. But I just think the tired legs are going to catch up with the Northern Colorado wins this one at home, and it's pretty much over to Union Omaha to try and match that.
Yeah, you mentioned that streak of form for Northern Colorado with 5 straight wins. They're really living and dying by the runs of form this year, where, I mean, just in their last 11 games, it's 4 losses in a row, then 2 draws in a row, then 5 wins in a row. So hopefully, if you're Northern Colorado at home, you can ride that hot streak a little more. They've got Trevor Amon back in goals in recent weeks. He's somebody that'll be influential. North Carolina did have some absences a couple games ago just because they've got a couple Caribbean international types of players. So that'll be big. They'll come out motivated, wanting to prove that they're really worthy of being in those top 2 spots and getting that entry into the next round in the playoffs. I ended up going with a draw. Gun to my head, I lean Hailstorm, but I think that these teams just canceled each other out to an extent. And then tactically as well, just the way that North Carolina is able to pack it in with those 2 deep banks of 4. I think that does well to limit what you get explosively from Arthur Rogers in a lot of ways. So it feels pretty even. I think it might be a little bit of a dull game, but knowing League One, it'll end up being chaos. Yeah, any other USL thoughts, soccer thoughts, things on your mind in terms of the sport?
No, I think yeah, it's just kind of getting into that business end of the season, and we're gearing up for a really fun playoffs ahead.
Can you believe we're under a month left until that final match day, October 14th? Really crazy.
I mean, this league, or the season has just kind of flown by as it always typically does, and you see teams like starting to clinch postseason appearances, and it's just kind of made it all more real for kind of more towards the end of the season. It'll be exciting, and I'm looking forward to the remainder of the year. We'll get a few more clinches in the championship over the next few weeks and in League One.
Yeah, it's crazy to see the League One table where like a quarter of the league is just eliminated already.
I mean, and we also have 3 teams who've already clinched for that as well.
Yeah.
And I think if we're looking at 3 teams within League One, obviously the top 2 will get that by. My hot take is going to say that we're going to have uh, Northern Colorado against either Omaha or North Carolina for the League One final this year.
It's a hot take because that league is so chaotic, but I love that it's bold to think one of those top handful of clubs is going to get in. But I agree with you that there's really a chance. Always a chance that a dark horse in League One makes the run. So it is bold to say, hey, it'll be one of those favorite clubs. But I'm with you. I think Northern Colorado, especially when they're on, they're just a cut above everybody else this season. Yeah, so with that, let's just pivot into some of the conclusions here. I know you've been busy, you've been out a week, but I'm sure that you've had some things that you've been checking in on entertainment watching wise. So any intel on that?
Oddly enough, the last day and a half I've been watching one of the Football Manager streamers on Twitch, Zealand. He had a video last week where he modded the game to put San Marino's national team in the Premier League and then send the 2022-23 season every year just to see if San Marino can win one game. That's all they needed to do. And in that video, it was a 13-minute video. It was fun watching YouTube. They didn't win, but he said if that video got 5,000 likes, he would stream on Twitch until San Marino won a game. And he did that all day Monday and just ended it earlier today. 21 hours, well over 100 seasons simulated, where he had basically run the simulation for 14 minutes, check the results, and then see if there was any victory, and then had to restart it. So he went through 100 different streams of it. 21 hours, and San Marino in that time drew 2 games, never won a single Premier League match in that entire simulation. It was funny to watch. Like, I went to bed on Monday night and he was still streaming the next morning. He split up a lot of time playing other games and then just checking the stem. But it was entertaining, and I really enjoyed just checking in on that throughout all of yesterday during packing and stuff.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I bet it would be accurate, but also at the same time, woof. I can't imagine streaming for that long.
I mean, he broke it up by having other YouTube videos. He did a lot of GeoGuessr and Sporkle quizzes. I think what was most demoralizing for him was those draws occurred on the 10th season and then on like the 30th season. So there was like 70 consecutive years where it was complete just lose every game. Most seasons they didn't score a single goal in it, and just to keep going, you could just see a descent into madness at some point that it's almost a goal that's almost too lofty for even a game such as Football Manager.
That's unreal. I guess, I mean, shouting out things on my end, super hyped to get off of this and watch the latest Ahsoka episode. In the past week, I got out to one of my local theaters, which shows older movies every now and again, and I got to see Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon on film. It's like 3 hours long. It's the story of this kind of Irish peasant who lies and cheats his way to the top of society and then falls back down again. Secretly super hilarious, like in this wry, kind of dark sort of way. But it's a movie that leaves you thinking. It flies by for something that long and something that's going on 50 years old at that point. For a stretch, it was free on YouTube because that just happens to movies occasionally. So go check out Barry Lyndon if you want to. And then, Ryan, I am throwing in one more bonus prediction because of our shared interest here. Let's get some North London Derby predictions in before we sign off.
So this will be probably the first match I'll watch, at least in the North Carolina supporters group when it's in Charlotte. So I'll actually be in a pub for it.
Oh, amazing.
For it. I mean, it beats when I typically just watch all the Spurs games here, sometimes just like through my hands, but certainly not with Ange Ball this season. I unfortunately think this is going to be a coming back down to earth. We just don't get results at the Emirates in the league, and I think it's going to be tough. I think it'll be a performance that we can kind of say, well, we tried our best, and we'll move on to Liverpool next week. But I would have to say Arsenal 2-1.
Yeah, I'm holding out hope because I kind of have to. I'm going to say it's a draw. I'm going to say Richarlison gets a start and scores with it because sometimes you need your dreams to get fulfilled. But I'm not going to go any bolder than a draw. This is going to be a tough one for sure. Yeah, so any other points you want to make before we get out of here? All right, then. Well, thank you to everybody who watched. Thank you to everybody who's listening on the podcast. Be sure to check out the kit show that we have on YouTube. Thank you first and foremost, and once again for donating and buying the kits that we did to support the Carter Payne Foundation. We really appreciate it. Check out all of the hosts on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. And even though we did not have Alan here, we talked about the San Diego Loyal, and we are going to give you his words as we sign off.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.